Right, good morning everyone, it's 10 o'clock. We'll start the meeting. Before I do, I'm looking at Teresa and I can see some young people next to Teresa. Do you want to just say who they are and why they're here today?
Thank you, Spencer. I think you mean you see Teresa as a young person and she has some others with her. Thank you very much. And I'd really like to introduce Phoebe and Tilly, who are two of our fantastic young people from Dorset who are part of the Takeover Challenge that many of you might remember was often a takeover day. This year we're doing a sort of takeover month. So really looking forward to having lots of young people around all of our processes and they're delighted to be here today and overwhelmed by the size and the magnitude, as you might imagine, but really interested in understanding what's happening. We might nip off before the end just because, you know, as interesting as we all are, it's important that we fit everything else in as well. Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Right, good morning, everyone. Apologies. We haven't got any apologies today, Kate, have we? So, declarations of interest. Anybody got any interests? If not, the usual. Minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of May. Can I sign those as a true record? Agreed. Thank you very much. Public participation, there isn't any this morning. And questions from members, there aren't any this morning. I'm looking at Brian, well, I'm looking at Brian for, but there aren't any today.
I'm looking at Brian.
So, move on to
forward.
We seem to have got some feedback. No, perhaps not now. Forward plan, as we all know, this is an iterative document. We've got quite a busy July. I know there's lots of other reports that will get fed into the forward plan process so that we all understand what our business is going forward. And I won't dwell on that at the moment. You're happy to note that, members? Noted?
Noted.
I go on to agenda item 7, and this is the first time we've had an item of this nature on the Cabinet agenda. And it's unusual because it's for information. But given that I mentioned at annual council about the key priorities that this council was looking at going forward, I thought it was appropriate that we should remind ourselves on a regular basis about our progress. And I thought the best one to start with, because we've made a huge amount of progress since we declared a climate and ecological emergency back in 2019, is exactly that. So Ray, can I hand over to Ray Bryan, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our younger generation, because it's you that the climate change is more about than it is at my age. So hopefully you'll understand some of the things I'm saying. If not, please ask questions. The Dorset Council Plan outlines our priorities as a council leading up to 2024, making clear our vision, steering our decision-making and where we prioritise our focus. This plan was developed after wide-ranging conversations with both the public and stakeholders. This report, the first of its kind for the Council, serves as an update on how we are progressing against these priorities, with a specific focus on the Climate and Ecological Emergency Strategy and Action Plan. Other priorities will be reported on in subsequent Cabinet meetings. As you will see from the report and its appendices, there is a lot of information reflecting the amount of work that has gone into delivering against this priority. As with all our priorities with the Council Plan, there is a scale to what we need to do, as these are the issues that we have been told need urgent action. As part of our commitment to make the Council carbon neutral by 2040, and I'll keep adding or earlier, we have put in place measures that have reduced the Council's emissions by 17% since 2019. Great progress has been made in areas such as buildings, water, streetlights and commuting. COVID has obviously had an impact, but has also provided us with learning. Based on the latest figures, Dorset emissions have also reduced by about 6%, and about 4% of the energy demands for both BCP and Dorset are now met through renewables. We have delivered many projects, including those that have been driven through securing the 19 million through the Public Sector Decarbonisation Fund, we continue to extend the EV infrastructure network, and projects such as Low Carbon Dorset, Healthy Homes Dorset have supported over 400 organisations and 130 homes respectively, with over £6.1 million worth of low carbon projects now operational. What I would also like to draw your attention to is some of the case studies in Appendix D. While many projects have financial or carbon values, one of the greatest outcomes from much of this work is the value that it provides to people and place. We have been working with garden centres, leisure centres, housing associations, community energy and arts and culture groups. The list goes on, but the work that has been undertaken is in many instances helping with the sustainability of small-scale operations, many of whom form the lifeblood of the communities within which they reside. They are rightly proud of what they have achieved. Dealing with the climate emergency is a people thing as much as a technological or policy one. However, whilst I would implore you to read through what has been provided in its entirety, acknowledging the work that has gone into delivering these successes by multiple partners, I wanted to draw your attention here today to the scale and scope of the challenges that we are facing. The challenges that we all face in combating the climate and ecological emergency are manifest. The complexity and scale are unprecedented, and the actions and leadership required is in many ways new territory for local authorities. This council directly accounts for about 1.5% of the emissions of Dorset. Action is required from all sections of society, and we must start to think about the climate and ecological emergencies through the same lens. I am keen today that we collectively start to think about the three-pillar approach, where the climate and ecological emergencies and our approach to adaptation are not seen in isolation. They are all interlinked, and the Council and partners need to do what they can to bring our collective work together in these areas to both make Dorset a beacon for climate and ecological action, but also making it resilient for the future. Nature can capture carbon. Natural flood management solutions can improve nature and capture carbon. The interdependencies go on. There is so much happening in Dorset in our natural world that we should be proud of our National Nature Reserve at Purbeck Heaths, covering 8,000 acres, which is the largest area of lowland heath in England and managed as a single nature reserve. And the South Dorset Marine Conservation Zone, which is 193 square kilometres. However, there clearly remains much to do with the impending introduction of local nature recovery strategies, how we collectively in Dorset manage our approach to promoting biodiversity and develop the synergies with our climate work. Working with the LNP and others will be of paramount importance. Working towards the government's target of 30% of land in positive management by 2030 will offer us the opportunity to focus our efforts alongside the 2040 and 2050 goals we already have in place. Additionally, it is clear now that we live in a changing world. Having a more strategic approach to how we approach adaptation through the development of a climate risk assessment for Dorset is of equal importance when we start to look at the flood and coastal risk. The built environment, planning and infrastructure moving forward. The development of an adaptation strategy is something that we're going to pursue. Bring all of this together will be challenging, and local systems leadership will be crucial in delivering this. But equally, we must be clear that as a local authority, we do not have all the tools or answers at our disposal. Whilst we have many place-shaping policies at our disposal and must ensure that our climate and ecological goals are at the forefront of these working with government in areas such as grid capacity, mass-scale retrofit and planning policy will be important to unlock the scale of change required. The letter from Councillor Flower asking government for more flexibilities that is attached to this report is just one angle that we are pursuing to strengthen our relationship with government to this end. Equally, how we can engage with communities, businesses, parish and town councils and climate networks will determine the extent to which we can start to drive behavioural change across all three pillars that I have outlined today. The refresh of the climate and ecological strategy will better reflect this changing emphasis, ensuring that actions are still relevant and also take into consideration the radically changed legislative, social and economic circumstances that we find ourselves in. However, the main focus will remain on actions, getting things done. In conclusion, whilst the recommendation is clear that the documents that have been provided will allow councillors and members of the public to review progress, I would also like to take this opportunity to ask those who feel they can contribute to the scale and scope of the challenge that I've outlined here today to please put their best foot forward in a collective and collegiate effort that we must all undertake to be successful. On a slightly further update, I'm pleased to report the success we are having working with the local farmers, giving advice and small amounts of funding under the Farming in Protected Landscapes scheme. This is part of DEFRA's Agricultural Transition Plan, which was launched in June 2021. The FIPL, which is what it's called, application window opened in July 2021 and will run for 3 years, ending in March 2024. FIPL will provide funding for one-off projects that support the 4 key themes, and they are climate outcomes, and the project should deliver more carbon being stored, sequestered, or both, reduce flood risk, a better understanding amongst farmers, land managers and the public as to what different habitats and land uses can deliver for carbon storage and reduce carbon emissions, a landscape that is more resilient to climate change. Number 2, nature outcomes. The project should deliver a greater area of wildlife-rich habitat, greater connectivity between habitats, better management of existing habitats for biodiversity and increased biodiversity. 3, people outcome. The project should deliver more opportunities for people to explore, enjoy and understand the landscapes, more opportunities for diverse audiences to explore, enjoy and understand the landscape. Greater public engagement in land management, for example, through volunteering. Number 4, place outcomes. The project should deliver enhancing or reinforcing the quality and character of the landscape. Historic structures and features being conserved, enhanced or interpreted more effectively. And an increase in the resilience of nature-friendly, sustainable farm business, which contributes to a more thriving local economy. I had the pleasure of visiting several of the sites last week, along with Tom Munro from the AONB and Stephen Ford and Anthony Littlechild, who work on our sustainability team. Stephen, of course, is the new addition, for which I'm very pleased to welcome, because there's so much we need to do. We are supporting with small grants from this fund and was very impressed by the commitment of the owners to bring about change. The reason I've raised this last item is because it's very important that people understand it's an ecological emergency as well as a climate emergency. And this highlights a lot of the work we are now doing in both sections. That's the end of my report, Leader, so I'm willing to take questions if anybody has any, if you'll allow them.
Thank you very much, Ray. As usual, you show your passion and commitment to this particular issue. Before I go any too far, I wanted to comment really about the quality of the report. I thought it was very well drafted, and it gives me a chance to welcome Stephen Ford and also to thank Anthony Littlechild for his contribution to how well that report was pulled together. And then I'll open it up for questions from or comments from non-cabinet colleagues. But before I do, and Brian's got his hand up, can I just welcome Anna Eastgate as well to this morning's cabinet. She's the new Corporate Director for Place Services. Welcome to Dorset Council. Brian.
Thank you, Spencer. Brian Heatley from Romwell and Wyke in Weymouth. I'm going to welcome a lot of this, and then I'm going to have a moan. Our critique of the Council's approach to the climate and ecological emergency has mainly had two parts. One part which has said, we want you to go a lot faster, and I won't have more to say on that today, you'll be relieved to hear. But one part which says, we don't feel you are taking seriously enough the ecological emergency, the issues of adaptation, and I'll add here the other greenhouse gases which are mainly produced by agriculture, that's methane and nitrous oxide. So I really welcome this three-pillar approach. I read the paper and I couldn't quite believe it, to be honest, to start with. It seems to me this is a major widening of the scope of what we're doing. As Ray has said, a critical thing about those things is that many of them are very integrated with land. What we have in Dorset is a lot of land, and it does seem to me that this is an area where Dorset can be a leader. A beacon was the word Ray used. It's extremely difficult because of all the politics around land ownership and so on and so forth. Changing land use is something the planning system doesn't do, for example. It's only interested in buildings. So we haven't got many levers to pull. But I think this is a major change of great importance, and I welcome it. The moan, you know what it is. It's going to be about management information. We have much the same report here as the one that went to Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee. There's a long list of wonderful things we've been doing, but very little context. There's one figure with context, the 17% improvement in the Council's own carbon emissions, because it compares the whole of what we did with the change we have made. But it's still full of figures like we've done things to 130 homes in a year. If you add in the other 240 odd homes that we share with BCP, that programme will take 800 years to do all the homes in Dorset. It's a drop in the ocean, and we need to understand this context. Now, the paper says in 12.1 that there's a mass of performance indicators that go to senior management. I'd like to hear today that we're going to see some of these performance indicators appearing on the dashboard that's available to all of us as councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Ray, do you want to come back?
Yes, thank you for the good points you've raised, and I'll take on board the slightly negative one, because at the moment, as I'm sure you're aware, Stephen is 3 weeks into his employment, and we've gone all out to provide the correct people in the right places so we can bring forward more factual information. And I hope Councillor Heatley will just give us a few, I won't say hours, but I will say weeks and months to get Stephen to get his team working on some of the more factual information that we both desire. I am asking already for a chart showing where our carbon reductions have been, because I think it's important that we highlight on all the good points, but identify that we've still got some things we need to do. But Stephen and the team will be very capable of delivering that. Stephen and I had a day out together. He had to suffer my driving the other day, but he arrived here safely with no grey hair. But we had the opportunity to discuss some of the things that we're going to need, Brian. So please be assured that these will take place. Stephen, do you want to add anything, being as you're present?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I think it's a very pertinent point around how we need to develop our management information moving forward. We've already put in place the steps now where I think certainly from the operational programme's perspective for the 2040 programme, we'll be able to provide some quite granular management information, certainly for the next scrutiny session in the autumn, which we will be able to give RAG ratings and baseline and progress level data as well, which should be far easier to both build accountability into the system, but also will be a more usable tool in terms of the scrutiny function as well. So that's something that we are developing as we speak as well. What we're also going to do as well is ensure that the Dorset level information is robust, and make sure that the facilitation and work that we're doing outside of our own operational emissions framework is put into a sort of a numerical sort of categorisation that is meaningful. Now, sometimes we do have to be slightly mindful that that might look as though these projects aren't being impactful because the percentages can be quite small, but it is going to be part of that ongoing annual inventory that we want to put in place now for the Dorset level emissions as well. So I can assure you that that is part of my remit and role to ensure that we get very robust with that management information moving forward.
Want to come back, Ray?
Yes, please. Thank you, Leader. I'd also like, for the benefit of both the younger audience that we have here today, but also the general public, Councillor Heatley raised the subject of it appears to be the same paper that went to scrutiny that comes here. That's the process. We take it to scrutiny. Scrutiny can look at the paperwork, they can make their recommendations, and some of the amendments that are in this paper have come about because of the scrutiny meeting. So I think it's important that we identify to the public that this is the flow of the way we do things. Thank you.
Anybody else before I open up to Cabinet? I don't see anybody with a hand up. Thank you very much, Ray. Peter, did you want to comment?
Thank you, Leader. First of all, can I thank Councillor Ray Brown for what is an extremely comprehensive report, which I think is very good in terms of the content and in terms of the direction that we are going in. Councillor Brian Heatley is a very interesting individual who always manages to be complimentary and critical in the same little paragraph. And I was a bit disappointed that you were critical in the sense that you seemed to intimate that this represented a change of approach. It doesn't. It represents a continuation of the work that Councillor Bryan has put his heart and soul in for the last few years. And I wouldn't want that particular view to gain any traction. I would also ask that this report is used by members and promulgated to all of their parish councils and all of their constituents, because it is a really good report which demonstrates what we're doing, puts the lie to a number of shibboleths that go around about what we're doing, and will hopefully make everybody better informed as to what we're doing, where we're going, and how we're doing it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Peter. I don't see anybody else indicating they want to speak, so I will draw this item to a close and just once again say what a good piece of work it was and how it demonstrates this council's commitment to one of the 10 key priorities that I set out back in May, and we will continue to do those through the year. So the recommendation was simply to review progress. I think we've probably done that. We move on to agenda item 8 now, the draft outturn report, and I'll invite 2021-22. Invite Gary Suttle. Gary.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I present the draft outturn report for 21-22. This is an important update. It's something that I promised to do throughout the coming year. It gives us the information about the budget, but also starts the process of thinking about next year's budget, and that all the work we will do later in the year. The highlight is that we have a budget deficit of just £571,000 for the year. If you recall, during the year, we saw potential for some significant deficit figures being projected. And we've worked to change both financial management and the way in which we consider budgets. The success cannot be underestimated. I cannot praise or thank the finance team enough for the work that was done over the last year to achieve what is in effect a break-even position and not many would have anticipated such an outcome during the year. As can be seen from a chart at 10.1, children and adults remain our priority, and during this year, significant work is being carried out by both directorates to bring the budgets closer. I thank both Peter Wharf and Andrew Parry for the work that they're carrying out and the vision of the future for their directorates. We'll be speaking a great deal more about both as the year progresses. Each of the directorates' expenditure and outcome is detailed in section 10 of the report, giving more detail. And I thank Jim McManus and team for giving us such a comprehensive report. It is important to note that our small deficit is in light of increasing the general fund by 2.27 million to 33.2 million. The reserves are set out in 11.3 of the report. Reserves are the lifeblood of finance, allowing this council to have the ability to be resilient in the light of significant financial pressures. It mitigates our risk in the budget and allows us the comfort of being able to be agile should any anomalies take place. I would like to touch on the level of debt, which is detailed in section 13. Although we've seen it grow to 31st of March 22 to 33.37 million, 38% of this, totaling 12.57 million, is actually less than 30 days old. Of course, the situation of the last 2 years could only result in an increase, but we've been proactive and used SWAP internal audit services to review the debt, and we're now implementing some recommendations. I will update you as the year progresses. However, I anticipate seeing reductions over the year. The coming year will be interesting as we see not just national but global pressures resulting in inflation at rates that only some of us will remember and most wish to forget. We will constantly monitor and review our budget as the year progresses. And let's not shy away from change if change is needed to reflect growing needs. We have experienced times that none of us have seen before, work that the council had never carried out before, COVID times, pressures that we could never have foreseen, let alone budget for. However, the finance team, revs and benefits have done all that was asked of them and more. We have maintained service delivery, we have supported the county, and we have still posted a virtual break-even for 21-22. We have never stopped challenging ourselves and our processes, including a peer review, the papers of which are also attached. And I think I'd like to read just a part from the final page, which says, there is a sense of pride and accomplishment of the council. The council is developing a mission statement which includes 10 priorities of differing timeframes. This should create a clear sense of direction, but important that they are properly integrated into other strategic plans to ensure proper alignment and clarity of priorities. And as you know, at the last meeting, the leader informed us of those priorities and the work that is ongoing, and we welcome the peer review's acknowledgement of this strategy. Whilst in this post, I will continue to accept the challenge of a budget and use whatever resources are at my disposal to ensure the directorates are funded adequately. Finally, I will say that my mantra remains in place, that we will invest to save and that money will remain available to all directorates for transformation. Thank you. I will just, there are recommendations at 1 to 4 on the front page. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary. Before I open it up to the Cabinet, any colleagues not on? David.
Good morning, Spencer. I'm not going to be as eloquent as my colleague next door and say, but it is a well-written report in my view, and I thank Gary for doing that. I've got, I was trying to stay out of the detail, a couple of queries, and if you'll allow a small piece of advice at the end. On page 75, you talk about value for money, but there's no detail. Now, given the medium-term financial plan means we've got to save £17 million over the next few years, I would think that a value for money framework is integral, and we're 3 years in, and we still don't have one. And whilst there's some words around reorganising and getting one started, I'd just like a little bit more detail as to when that work will start and finish, and when we can implement a value for money framework, because we can't challenge ourselves on a cost basis if we don't benchmark against other councils, other service providers, and our own internal processes. So I see value for money framework as the driver of efficiency. So if along with these sort of KPIs. So if somebody could say some words about that. Would you like me to say the other queries I've got, or would you just start? On the reserve front, I note the reserves at 33.2 million, Gary, and we're at the sort of between the 5 and 10% bandwidth. We're right at the top. I'd just like to ask whether we used any reserves in the last year, because you know, I've seen the sort of mandate around what we use reserves for, but if you could, if you take into a broader financial around the debts, and I'm glad you mentioned interest, because you know we could use some reserves to reduce that. I note in the CIPFA results, interest paid is 14%. I just wonder whether we considered that, or whether we considered fixed-term contracts to sort of drive out some of the work that we're behind with, a bit like value for money or some of the maintenance stuff. One-off costs, we could use reserves to sort of get through the work, and I wonder whether that had been considered, because there does seem to be a bottleneck now around some of the things that we have ambition to do and want to do, but we don't have either the officer time or the expertise to get through it. And I think it's a legitimate challenge to say, should we use reserves one-off to get through some of this stuff, climate and ecological emergency or maintenance or something like that. I won't go into the rest of the details, so other people might want to speak. I'd like to say on at the very end of the report, page 86, next steps. The only critical thing I have to say about the report is, can we separate, Aidan, next steps from day job? Because we know what the finance function should do as a day job. I'm really interested in some of the next steps that drive the agenda forward. And the list of next steps is pretty much, some of it's what you do every day. And I'm interested in some of the additional things that we're doing. And it's not clear about what they are, but a well-written report, and I welcome more of these to come. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Gary.
David, about reserves. I think, David, we've got a very interesting 12 months ahead of us. I think inflation will be the factor that will determine what our strategy will be with reserves over the coming 12 months. And right now, my feeling is that we need to sit tight before we start using reserves for anything at all, if you like, other than stepping back and watching what inflation and what the national picture is doing. I'm sure you probably agree that we've got no alternative right at this moment in time in that. I'm going to ask Aidan to comment on your first question. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Aidan Dunn. I'm the Executive Director for Corporate Development and Chief Finance Officer for the Council. So the first question around value for money is a really, really good and pertinent question. Through the Audit Committee, we've developed a piece of work around setting out the framework for value for money. And what we wanted to do was to start with a piece of benchmarking to see what benchmarking is already available across local government nationally. So we've looked at various areas, in particular, for example, the ICT operations service, so we can compare how much we spend, but in particular what outcomes we get. So it's not just about having low cost, it's about outcomes as well. So we've been researching what benchmarking is already available in ICT. And indeed, into tomorrow's report, going to the Audit Committee, there's a little bit more detail from the auditors about work they've been doing on benchmarking as well. So value for money, it's something we are researching, seeing what data is available, and then seeing where the gaps are for us to develop the framework. So something that we're very keen to pursue, and I think is a really important step forward. Following the efficiencies we've got through the convergence and setting up the council, we now need to make sure we benchmark effectively. Just secondly, on the question about reserves, have we spent reserves during the course of the year? Yes, we have, but also you'll see that just comparison year on year, the reserves have gone up as well. So detailed in the report is confirmation that we spent, for example, £10 million of reserves in terms of the council's contribution to the high needs block deficit, which is part of a deal which we did with the Department for Education, and as part of our contribution, and the DFE have put in 42 million. But also during the course of the year, we've received additional funding from both government but also from the NHS locally, which we're holding in reserves on behalf of the system. So it's quite a complicated picture in terms of reserves going up and down. But overall, I think, as the finance strategy describes, that the reserves are there, first of all, as a safety net, but secondly, as an opportunity to invest. And it very much finishes with Gary's final point in his introductory remark. There's an opportunity to invest to save there. And I think that absolutely fits with your final point, that is there anything that we can do quicker to get value for money, be it investing sort of one-off spend to avoid revenue costs. And that's absolutely at the heart of what Councillor Suttle's describing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aidan. Anybody else? Brian?
Thank you, Spencer. Just a simple observation about what is happening to the two big budgets. In our first year as a council, the combined overspend on adults and children was 20 million. In the second year, it was 16 million. This third year, it's just 3 million. And I think a lot of us have been worried about the control of those budgets. And I know there's all sorts of special factors, particularly that second year, but it does seem to show a sort of welcome tightening in control on those big numbers. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment, Brian. Very helpful. Cabinet colleagues, anybody got anything to add to Gary's report? Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. And just sort of reflecting on Councillor Heatley's comments there, certainly the journey for children's services over the 3-year period you described started with a very significant reorganisation of Blueprint for Change, which was clearly about delivering a new way of working and sustainable budgets going forward. I'm very proud of the team for delivering £4.75 million worth of tactical savings in the last year, whilst also achieving a good and with outstanding leadership from Ofsted. That is no mean feat. The new ways of working are starting to show the delivery of savings, and we have more to do. We understand that. But please rest assured that we are very much focused on delivering the very best we can for our children and young people. And I suspect I will find Councillor Wolfe echoing similar sentiment from an adult's perspective.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Gary, would you like to move the recommendation? I know Peter's going to second it in a moment.
Yes, so I move the recommendations there set out on the first page from 1 to 4. We take them as together, I hope. Thank you.
Does any member of the Cabinet disagree with the recommendation set out in the report? In that case, in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. Move on now to agenda item 9, Stinford Neighbourhood Plan 2021 to 2038. David Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm very pleased to be able to continue the good news theme today in this Cabinet meeting. Because if this neighbourhood plan is made, and I see no reason why it wouldn't be, it'll be the 34th made neighbourhood plan for Dorset. And we have 25 in progress, which I think is just phenomenal. The amount of community work out there that they want to help develop their communities, which I think is absolutely fantastic. The neighbourhood plan area for Stinsford was formally designated by West Dorset District Council in September 2017. And following significant amounts of consultation and research, Stinsford Parish Council submitted the neighbourhood plan 2021 to 2038 and associated documents to Dorset Council in September 2021. The plan and associated documents were subject to formal consultation, and subsequently Dorset Council made arrangements for an independent examination of the plan as required by the Neighbourhood Planning Regulations 2012. An examination was conducted on the Stinsford Neighbourhood Plan, and the examiner's report concluded that, subject to a number of modifications, the plan should proceed to referendum. We held a referendum on the 5th of May 2022, with the area covered by the referendum being the civil parish of Stinsford, the same area to which the neighbourhood plan applies. In the referendum, 91.1% of those voting voted in favour of the plan. And statute says where a referendum results in more than half of those voting in favour of the proposal, the council must make the plan as soon as reasonably practical, unless it considers that this would breach or be incompatible with relevant environmental regulations or human rights requirements. I'm very pleased to say there is no such breach. And so I am asking, through those recommendations, for us to make this neighbourhood plan.
David, comments from anyone? Although I'll open it up to the Cabinet. Sorry? Yeah. Jill, and then Laura.
Right, Comrade. Thank you, Leader. Yes, very happy to support this. Used to be my Dorset County Council patch, and I'm sure they worked very hard to get to this stage, so very happy to support it. And if, David, you need a seconder, I'm happy to second as well.
Laura?
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, David. I just wanted to recognise town and parish councils come under my portfolio, and I just wanted to recognise that when something comes to Cabinet, a huge amount of work has gone into it, and officers at the council are paid, members receive an allowance. Town and parish councils and people that work on town and parish council committees, some towns, the larger ones, receive an allowance, but the smaller ones don't. And so I just wanted to recognise that this, whenever we make a neighbourhood plan, by and large, it's been put together by volunteers who really care about where they live, and I think that's really something to celebrate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. In fact, it is, because I've said it myself before. 34, is it, we've got now? What a huge amount of work that's gone into that. And they've all been really quality outcomes, well presented, well thought through, and supported very well by the communities they serve. So I think this is another example of that, and they need our congratulations right across the board, in my view. So it's been proposed and seconded. Does any member disagree with the recommendations in the report? In that case, in the absence of disagreement, recommendations are approved. We now move on to agenda item 10, future development of Dorset Innovation Park. Tony Ferrari.
Thank you, Chair. I bring this forward today as a reflection of the success of the work that we put in to date on the Dorset Innovation Park. It's particularly pleasing and because I'm old, I was the portfolio holder on Dorset County Council that signed off from that perspective, the opening of the Innovation Park in the first place, so I really have been around a long time. The park is being extremely successful in what it does. We've now opened the Battle Lab. The quadrant that we've already built there are now full. The business model of the Battle Lab is that it is open for short-term tenancies. The objective is not to have permanent tenants in there, but to bring people in for short periods of time where they can work on projects with the Ministry of Defence, and they can either complete the project and leave, or they can, if they want to continue to work with the MOD in the park, they can move on to another business premises within the park, a rental unit, or potentially building their own building. But there are no spare quadrant units available as we speak. So the first purpose of this paper is to facilitate that flow of businesses through from the Battle Lab into the Innovation Park quadrant units and then potentially onto plots. But we sat down and said, that's not bold and ambitious. That's dealing with the short-term opportunity we have on the park. So we said, what is the bold and ambitious strategy that we should take forward? And that's what this Cabinet paper brings forward today. So it's got a quadrant unit in it, but it's also got the creation of a social and amenity hub to facilitate the community within the park, to encourage tenants and to make it a more pleasant place for companies to come and work. An improvement in the gatehouse as the security needs on the park have risen there is an aspiration to increase the security possibilities at the gatehouse, and what we would almost certainly incorporate into that is some hotel-style accommodation, so visitors who are working on the park temporarily have got hotel accommodation there. And we've also got 2 further quadrant-style units that are for particular customers to take forward and develop into. So this is a medium-term strategy, 4 years. It also looks beyond the park being full. So what we've brought forward in this paper is a proposal to acquire a piece of land next to the park. For those who know the park, it's the bit between the road and the police office, police headquarters, and that part there is owned by Homes England, and we are looking to bring it into the park structure so that we can use that as an overflow facility when the park fills. It's probably worth commenting on the financing of this deal. It's unusual in that the constitutional arrangements that set up the park compel us to use certain categories of money within the park. What we've also done is we've gone to the LEP and we've negotiated with them so that all of the income that arises to both parties, both ourselves and the LEP, so that's to ourselves, income from plot sales, to ourselves and the LEP, we share the retained business rates. All of that funding will be dedicated to these projects. We had an external consultant, Cushman & Wakefield, who audited the retained business rates income for the site, and it's projected that over the 25 years of the site, the income that will be generated in retained business rates will be about double what's in this paper today. So it's a secure medium-term income stream that we are just facilitating to bring the facilities forwards. So what the recommendations of the paper bring forward are cabinet approval for the quadrant itself, delegation of the spending of that money to the portfolio holder and the executive director for the building of the quadrant, and for your note, the 4-year investment programme for all the other facilities that I've talked about. The park's being extremely successful. It's time for us to accelerate and build on that success, and I commend the recommendations to the council. Thank you. To cabinet.
Thank you very much, Tony. Comments? Anybody? Not on the cabinet? Not on the cabinet. Trigger, hang on. In that case, Laura.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tony. I think this is a really good next step. I absolutely welcome the economic investment for transparency in mine and Peter's ward, in our shared ward of West Purbeck. When I was very small, my dad worked on the site when it was a nuclear site, and I have memories of going for a Christmas party where we were allowed to put our hands in gloves and move around glowing stuff, which was lovely. And so it's always been a sort of place where you think, gosh, lots could happen there. And after it was decommissioned, there was this kind of, then I joined Purbeck District, and there was this kind of, what we're going to do with it? Is it going to be a success? And so every time something like this comes forward with the Innovation Park, I just think, brilliant, it's really accelerating. The question that I wanted to ask really was on behalf of our parishes and our local residents, around opportunities for the future, for apprenticeships, for things like that. And I understand that we're not going to be able to approve this today, hopefully, and then immediately parachute in tons of local jobs, tons of local opportunities. But could you sort of cast a bit of a light on what those might look like as this goes forward? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I start with an apology? We have no plans to do any glowing stuff moving of any sort. The evolution of the employment in the local area and Dorset as a whole will change over time. When a tenant moves into the Battle Lab, the terms and conditions of the Battle Lab is that that's a temporary tenancy. So none of those jobs will be held by Dorset residents. There'll be people that will come in from the company, wherever it might be, and work on a project there. Which isn't to say that even at that stage, there isn't some job creation in Dorset, because all of those people are going to be staying in a local hotel and eating in a local pub and using local cabs and all the local services that they'll use. Then, those that evolved taking one of these quadrant units will employ locally as well, because they'll employ local printers and marketing companies and all of those sorts of things to support their services. And over time, they'll start taking on apprentices, and those apprentices will come from locally, because they won't be bringing apprentices from elsewhere, they'll be bringing apprentices in locally. So I think what we'll see over time is an evolution of the workforce composition from initially a parachuted in workforce, but over time it will turn into a very much more Dorset-based workforce. And I think you'll see that on every single one of these units we open, that they'll all have the same evolution of job profile. But 794 today, targeted to get to 2,000. That doesn't talk about the spin-off services job in the rest of the community. This is a really important job creation opportunity at all sorts of levels for Dorset. I think it's a fantastic story.
Anybody else? Andrew.
Thank you. I'm sure you would expect me as the portfolio holder for skills, but also from a leading perspective as a corporate parent, to want to make the case that the second and third phases that Tony's talking about here, it's really important that we have an established link between Dorset Council and those career and social mobility opportunities for both our care leavers and, of course, those we would deem to be at risk of not being in education, employment or training. And so if I can assist Tony in any of that work, I'd be very happy to do so.
Thank you, Andrew. Anybody else? Right, the recommendation, Tony, you've moved the recommendation. Do you have a seconder? Seconded by Jill. 3 parts set out in the report. Any members disagree with the recommendations in the report? In that case, in the absence of disagreement, the recommendations are approved. Now go on to agenda item 11, which is portfolio holder lead member updates, including policy referrals to report. I've brought these together because they were all interrelated. And thank you very much for those of you that have sent your reports in. They'll get published in the usual way. But I know that Peter Wolf and Laura Miller want to talk briefly to their reports. Peter.
Thank you, Leader. The report format is the same as was produced by Councillor Andrew Parry for Children's, and I'm grateful. I didn't tell you I was going to use the format, but it's an excellent format, and I thought, why change something that works? So I've used exactly the same format. It will go out. And it's split into three key activities since the last report, delegated decisions made, and anticipated activities milestones for the next period. I'm not going to go through in detail the key activities. People can read it, but they are Care Dorset. We are on course to meet the October 22nd deadline that I described in previous Cabinet meetings and at previous members' seminars. We put some information about birth hospital discharge programme. The Birth to Settled Adulthood programme is working really well, and we're about to launch a major consultation exercise led by my Cabinet lead, Jane Somper, and I'm very grateful for the work she's doing on that. The Better Care Fund has been signed off for the previous years, and we're producing a fund for the next 2 years. We're making good progress on the fairer cost of care exercise that we agreed to undertake, and our relations and our working with public health is moving ahead at speed. All of these are in detail in the report. In terms of the milestones for the next period, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the People and Health Overview Committee, which is chaired by Councillor Mike Parks. We had a meeting with Councillor Mike Parks and the committee some time ago. It was a virtual committee where we discussed the work we were doing on developing a clear strategy for the Directorate over the next 5 years. That has progressed, and we're working with that committee so that they can actually review all of the stages of that development. And I recommend any member who is not on the committee to turn up to the committee because we would be very interested in your input. The next meeting of that is on the 28th of June, where we will be presenting effectively 3 strands: the strand of commissioning strategies, the strand of social care reform, and the development of the integrated care strategy, working in partnership with the integrated care partnership, which is now being set up and is effectively replacing much, if not all, of CCG. We have the first of our meetings with the Overview Committee on the 28th, where Jonathan Price, the Corporate Director for Commissioning, who is here, is going to present those 3 items, and we're looking for a lot of input from that committee. We will be talking to that committee if we need to further on these items. We will then be having, sorry to use the phrase, but it is relevant, we'll be having co-production sessions right through the summer of consultation that Jonathan and I have decided to call it. And we will be talking to members and partners about this strategy that we are developing. There will be a series of activities and there will be opportunities for members and partners to contribute to the development of this strategy. And the key endpoint, there will be 2 endpoints. One is, and this wasn't, I didn't raise this in the forward plan because I want to make sure that this is agreed with the Overview Committee and I want them to be comfortable about it. But we've already discussed these dates with them. We will bring the initial strategy's findings to the November Cabinet. The idea we had was that we wouldn't agree it at that Cabinet, even though we'd been through very extensive consultation, but we'd present it because our experience is that quite often when you present something at Cabinet, people say, oh, I haven't had a chance to, let me have a look at it, I need to make a comment. So we're giving everybody another chance, and then at the December Cabinet, we will present it for approval. That's the current plan. The important thing I think people in this room need to recognise, and this virtual room, is that the importance of this exercise is in the process, not the end in December, because we are trying to work to get a much clearer plan for the whole directorate for the next 5 years, which is bought into by a variety of partners, including the Integrated Care Partnership, which has just been set up and doesn't actually start until July. And they've got a variety of new functions and they're developing their own strategy. So it's really important that we work with them because there has occasionally been criticism that public health and NHS and ICS don't always work as effectively with us as we might. And to be honest, I don't mind a degree of tension. I want you to agree what those areas of tension are. I don't mind that. And we can do that by having a clear strategy and getting their input. Jonathan, I'm going to ask you in 1 minute through the chair if you wanted to make any final comment on that. So just to repeat, the 3 areas, excuse me, are the commissioning strategy, the social care reform, and the development of the integrated care strategy. And there's going to be effectively a 5-year plan, which will be a lengthy document, which we hope to agree in December. But as I've said, I think the importance of this is in the process up to December, not the final plan. It will, of course, input into the budget process because that will input into the budget process for next year. And to be honest, for the 5 years as a whole. So this is a really important platform for us to move forward. I'm not saying you have to, Jonathan, but through you, Chair, can I ask if the Corporate Director for Commissioning, who is leading this process, wants to make any comment before I ask you to, to let me finish the other 2 items. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wharf. No, I think that's very comprehensive. The only thing I would add is obviously, the exercise will be extensive and everyone's views as part of that will be very important. So I think we'll get a full and rich document coming back at the end of that. But thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And two final items in terms of anticipated milestones. The July Cabinet, we will be providing an update on the Care Dorset with a paper on the establishment of a shareholder committee for Care Dorset. And we will also be bringing a report on the future service provision, although some details of that will be exempt because they do contain personal information. And as I've said earlier, on the 23rd of June, the independent chair of the Birth to Settled Adulthood, along with the Dorset Parent Carer Council, senior officers and stakeholders will be formally launching what we call the B2SA, the Birth to Settled Adulthood Programme. So that's the report from the adult sector that I am responsible for as a Cabinet member. I hope you find it useful. When the report is issued, please feel free to come and ask questions, and please be involved in the consultation on the 5-year plan. It's absolutely essential we get extensive member involvement in this, because when we've done this, this is going to be absolutely the platform for the next 5 years. Thank you, Chair.
I'd like to add something to what you said. Jane?
Yes, thank you. Yes, just thank you very much. Just touching on the Birth to Settled Adulthood projects. I'm very much looking forward to the launch later this week of this project, which does show the strength of co-production, both internally here at Dorset Council with Adult Services and Children's Directorate, both working very closely together, along with, as you said, partners in health, and of course, most importantly, our young people and families who will help to shape the very best seamless service for young people who need care and support beyond the age of 18.
Thanks for that, Jane. Laura?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight some of the events that I've been to recently in the cultural bit of my job, because I think quite often we forget that culture is something that the council actually funds and is, and is a really important area. So it's all Weymouth based, and it sort of seems to go like that. But I opened the Weymouth Pop-Up Museum, which was brilliant because it's been resident in Brewers Quay, and Brewers Quay has been a difficult ride, I think we would all agree. So that it's brilliant to have a pop-up museum in the centre of Weymouth. Everybody should go there and have a look. It's really interesting. Went to the opening of the Weymouth Sculpture Trail, which Dorset Council's provided funding for. Some really brilliant artwork on display, and that you can sort of sit on and use, and it's really, really lovely. And it's a nice walk around the town, so encourage you to do that. And then on Saturday, I went to B-Side's Assemblage on Portland. B-Side run a festival in September, and they have their first assemblage, which was a discussion on whose land is it anyway. And they attracted people from all over the world to come and speak at it. You know, in little island Portland, there were international authors. Anita Sethi was there. She's just won Women's Book Writing Prize. A chap from Rwanda. Really, really interesting speakers. And I think sometimes we forget the importance, both economically and in terms of well-being, that the cultural sector, that Dorset Council, really keen to promote that, and the importance, both financially and for our well-being, that has. So I just wanted to just shine a little bit of light onto that. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Laura. Right, everyone. That's the end of that item. Agenda item 12, urgent items. There aren't any. An exempt business, there isn't any. So at just after 11 o'clock, I'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much.